Good morning. Yes, I'll say it with enthusiasm. Good morning, because if we don't start our day off enthusiastic, then how are we going to be and remain with inspiration? So good morning to everybody. Welcome to our Monday Motivation Spotlight series. I'm Lesley Kaplan. Yes, we have to say, as I say, good morning with a bit of oomph in it, even if we're not sure if it's a good morning. We started the series, as you know, because of the war, to basically, on the one hand, give a spotlight to Israeli businesses, organizations, and individuals, and on the other hand, and a big on the other hand, to continue inspiring others to remain positive and to remain motivated during these challenging times. We're here every Monday for 30 minutes, our weekly Monday Motivation Spotlight. And yes, this last week has seen many challenges and many, sadness for Am Yisrael, but we're here keeping strong. And no doubt we will prevail, and more than just prevail, we're going to come back with an oomph and let the world know who we are. So as you know, the series is sponsored by ACI and co-sponsored by our friends, Israel Properties, Stammelman and Partners. Thank you very much. And today we have a very special guest. Every week we have a special guest. I know I say that every week, but today we have somebody who has been inspiring me for a long time, even though we'd never met personally. And I'm sure you've all heard of the organization Leket Israel. So our famous guest today, yes, I will say famous, is Joseph, otherwise known as Joe Gitler. Joseph started Leket Israel as a one-man operation in 2003. And today it's grown to be an operation which serves 250 nonprofit organizations, serving more than 223,000 people every single week. Basically, in terms of solving on the one hand, food waste, and on the other hand, collecting extra food and distributing it to others. Even during the war now, Joseph, I see that you've stepped up amazingly. You've got tons of volunteers, and I'm sure you'll tell us all about it, that are actually going out helping the farmers, as well as everything else that you're doing. So I'm going to officially take the spotlight off me, and I'm going to move it on to you. And we look forward to hearing your story, your inspiration, things that have happened, any other things that you can tell us, inspiring moments that you've had throughout your career with Leket Israel. And feel free, ladies and gents, to ask Joseph any questions, to make any comments in the chat. As you know, please keep yourself on mute. And feel free to share any moments of inspiration, as well as, even though it's not an official networking group, as well as your business details, because we're here to support business owners too. Thank you, Joseph. Good morning. Thank you so much for being our guest.
Thank you, Lesley. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for all of you who are on this morning. This is really beautiful, much needed, all these types of initiatives. So thank you to Lesley and to ACI and to Israel Properties, the sponsor. It's really nice to be on. I haven't been doing a lot of things like this, so it's a nice break for me also. Like all of you, we're going through very difficult times together. And of course, I'll start off by saying we pray for the very quick release of all our hostages safely and for all our soldiers to return home. I have a few of them in my own family in Gaza, as I'm sure many of you do as well. And I say often when I'm talking to the press that I'm very lucky that I have Leket, because it is keeping me busy 24/7. I don't want to say 7. Maybe the first week it was 7. Maybe now we're back down to 6. But and that's been a particular challenge for someone who's religious. I would say actually over the last 6 weeks since this all started. But that's not our topic for today. But you can have the rabbi of our shul. He can come speak to you guys next time if you want to talk about the challenges of Sabbath observance during a war. For people who are not soldiers. So, I'll just introduce myself briefly. And by the way, Lesley, I should say, first of all, a few things. Number one, please ask questions whenever you like. You can put them in I don't want to get in trouble with the organizer. So yes, put them in the chat. I'm happy to hear your voice also, but I leave that with Lesley to be in charge. Lesley also reminded me.
I think at a certain stage, if you want to ask questions that people can talk, we can do it. But I think initially, let's do it in the chat. Otherwise, you're going to be getting interrupted all the time.
And I would add, Lesley, thank you. I think you said I'm famous. So my late father used to say, "You're a legend in your own mind." So he used to say to me all the time. So, maybe a little famous, but that's where I'd like to keep it. And that's fine. the focus is on the organization, but whatever needs to be done, and if getting spotlight here or there means that Leket can do more, then I think that it's worthwhile to have your name out there. So, anyone who's on here who's also doing charity work, keep that in mind. That sometimes you have to expose yourself a little bit if you want to be able to do big things. And it's not always so comfortable, but you have to do it. And only once, by the way, did I do an article that my wife was ready to kill, because I included her and the family in it. So you can look that up afterwards, but it's in Hebrew. So I'm not telling you where to find it. You can look at, you can try to figure it out yourselves. Okay, so Leket's 20 years old, as Lesley mentioned. And I would say until October 7th, everything was humming along. In a way, I feel like, these kind of talks remind me a little bit of a month or two into COVID, when, that whole word pivot or re-engineering entered the fray. And I feel like we're a little bit there right now, unfortunately. And so, I would really say if we went back to October 6th, Leket was working hard, doing what we do, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And we felt good about ourselves. And when I say that, what I mean is that we've expanded dramatically over the last few years, far bigger than we had for many, many years. We doubled in size for the first 7 or 8 years of our existence. And then, of course, that starts to become impossible. And then during COVID times, we were able to expand dramatically again. And so we were kind of on a nice path, but not a major growth path. Now, just to take one step back for people who are less familiar, because I should not assume anyone's familiar with our work, Leket is actually quite a simple organization in its structure. What we've been doing for the past 20 years is basically saying we live, thankfully, in a successful Western country. And in successful Western countries, waste with abandon. Okay? That means I'm comparing us to the US, to Canada, to the UK, to Australia. If I missed, I'm purposefully not saying South Africa, because it's a different animal, South Africa. But, and I think those of you who are South African on the call would understand that. But if you take, the typical wealthy English-speaking countries, okay, those are countries that can afford to waste. We may not like it. It may not connect with our, it may not connect with our ethos. It may not connect with our history in the Bible. And of course, our name, Leket, which is of course a name that's synonymous with not wasting, and it means gleaning. And of course, we have, commandments in the Bible. And even though Leket is not a religious organization, we still take some inspiration, from the Bible. And of course, we have also in the Bible, Bal Tashchit, not wasting. And so the Leket of 2003, and certainly the Israel of 2003, and certainly the Israel of 2023 is a country which has attained great economic heights, startup nation for good and for bad, and we can get into that a little bit, but essentially it's created tremendous wealth for the country that I don't think anyone who's on this Zoom could have ever anticipated. We probably should have understood that that's what would happen in the Jewish state, but it's probably something that would have been hard for us to anticipate. But of course, that wealth that's been created, the economy that's been created, that brings along two things. So on the one hand, it brings waste, because in 2003 and certainly in 2023, while we hear complaints about the cost of food in Israel, and I'm, at the front lines talking about the cost of food, for many of us who are fortunate, while the cost of food might be going up, it doesn't make a dramatic change in our lives. But what it does make a dramatic change in lives of people who are struggling to make ends meet already. Okay, so that's kind of one side of the coin: cost of food and waste, and we'll put that on one side. And that food being wasted, which has just continued dramatically. I'll often say to people, 20 years into Leket, food waste has not changed at all. There's more of an awareness of it. It's a topic that people talk about. It's not something people spoke about in 2003. People understand it. People are bothered by it, but it hasn't changed at all. You go to hotels, it's the same. You go to army bases, it's the same. You go to people's Shabbat tables, it's the same. You go out to eat in restaurants, it's the same. The difference is that 20 years ago, we started Leket. And the job of Leket, while of course we care about education and we'd like to change people's attitudes towards food and how they view food and how they waste food, we have not had a big impact in that way. And I think that's somewhat cultural. And again, because this is a country where food is readily available, okay, we're not in Haiti, we're not in Darfur, we're not in India, we're not in places where there literally is no food, okay? So that allows us to view food differently. And of course, for people of a certain age, or people who've, people of a certain age, or people who, who went through the Shoah or lived in Israel when it was a poor country, these things are unimaginable. But again, as strange as it sounds, and then I'll move on, it's a bit of a sign of success for a country economically. When there's a lot of waste, it means the country has arrived. Okay, so that's a bit of our jumping off point. So 20 years ago, we founded Leket. And the idea behind Leket is let's figure out the ways to get the logistics of getting our hands on healthy, and I'm saying this very specifically, healthy, safe, and nutritious food, and getting that to people who need it, okay? Now, when I say that, what I'm saying is not that I'm not against unhealthy food. I eat plenty of it myself. But understanding that with the limited resources of any charity, we need to focus our energies. And we decided to focus our energies on areas that we thought there were holes in, where people weren't dealing with them, and where we get the most bang for our buck. And of course, when I started investigating 20 years ago, it was very clear that when it came to things like dry goods, there were 1,000,001 agencies dealing in dry goods. And when I started to ask around about, okay, I go to these weddings and bar and bat mitzvahs, and there's always so much food left over at the end. What's happening with that food? I didn't get the kind of responses I was expecting. The responses I got mostly were, it's getting thrown out. Maybe the families, when you make a simcha, takes a little bit of it, but essentially it gets thrown out. And so it was obvious to me at the time that here you had wonderful food that wasn't being dealt with. And of course, Israel's catering community, which I didn't know would be so willing and accepting to give that food away free of charge. Now, I'll let you in on a little secret here that I don't have any proof for, but I think everyone on this call, because I'm assuming everyone on here is probably either an Ole or a native English speaker or someone who's, connected with a native English speaker. I am convinced, although I have no proof, that my accent in English, in Hebrew, when I made those calls 20 years ago to caterers, helped dramatically. They didn't think some crazy American guy was calling them up in order to take their leftover food and then go sell it in the shuk. Okay, that's just we're not known for that. Okay, and so I think that disarmed all those initial conversations I had with caterers when I said to them, would you give me your leftover food? I've never asked anyone that, but I'm convinced. And my Hebrew then was pretty bad as well. Now it's much better 20 years in. And I even remember at the time, and you'll all appreciate this as well, kind of looking up in the dictionary some of the key words that I thought I would need when speaking to caterers. And of course, so many of those key words were just transliterations of English, which of course are the words that many of us have the hardest time saying, at least if you're like me. So, that's sort of what happened in the beginning. The catering community right away said, where were you yesterday? Can you come tomorrow? We're throwing away so much food. We've been waiting for something like this. And of course, for me, that was a push, to jump into things. No one said, what's my risk of legal liability? What kind of tax deduction can I get? It was just this wave of, remember, 2003 was the height of Intifada. Okay, so it was a very tough time economically for Israel, and a lot of people were suffering. So, these caterers right away saying, we want to help. By the way, what they should have said is we want to help and we'll deliver the food directly to the agencies. Unfortunately, we offered them, again, this is a good life's lesson. You want to offer good customer service, but sometimes if your customer service is too good, it comes back to bite you. And so that's been 20 years of offering top-notch customer service, which of course we understand. That's why Leket has the good name it has. And that's why agencies love to work with us, and farmers love to work with us, and caterers love to work with us, because we work so hard to make things efficient and easy for them, because we respect the fact that they're trying to run a business and make money, which is perfectly okay with us. And so the better service we can provide, the less friction, or as people, I'm guessing Lesley probably likes this word, frictionless, as we can make it, that is certainly part of our success. So that's kind of the founding of Leket, and I was running around and picking up food, and we've really gone from strength to strength till then. Today, that project, which collects meals, and this will be a good jumping off point also for a minute to talk about post-October 7th, at least in one of our projects, but that project on a daily basis brings in somewhere between 10 to 15,000 meals. It's coming today primarily from army bases, from corporate cafeterias, and from the hotel industry. We still do some events here or there, but a lot of that we've passed over to our network of agencies. I should mention also that our network of agencies today numbers about 275 agencies, throughout the country, and those are Jewish and non-Jewish alike, and those run the gamut from soup kitchens to homeless shelters to battered women's shelters to after-school clubs for kids to subsidized housing for the elderly. Really, any kind of agency that feeds the poor, either as their core mission or as part of what they do. And we impact normally around 250,000 people a week with our work. Some of them cooked meals, some of them fruits and vegetables, some of them both. Okay, so just as an example of what's gone on, so as you can imagine, most of the cooked meals that Leket collects in its normal course of business have almost completely dried up since October 7th. The IDF is not working like it normally does. There's no time for Leket trucks to be gallivanting around army bases. They just don't have the wherewithal to think about that now. The hotel industry, while a lot of hotels are quite full, they're running very differently than normally when they have normal paying guests, as opposed to guests who are primarily being paid for by the government at much lower rates. The kind of food and the kind of buffets that Leket normally takes advantage of have dried up, okay? For those who work in big companies where Leket often collects a lot of food, a lot of people are, again, working from home because of familial issues, and that leads to much less food being ordered. So some of that has started to come back a little bit over the last week or two, but essentially one of the many campaigns that Leket has launched over the last 6 weeks is to purchase cooked meals, okay? And we are purchasing on average somewhere between, again, 10 to 15,000 cooked meals every single day. We're trying to buy them from hard-hit businesses in the South and the North. Just to give an example of a business that's not from the South and the North that we are purchasing from. So there are two big caterers at the airport. One of them takes care of El Al. They're still busy. The other one takes care of most of the other airlines. Their business basically went to zero over the course of a few days. So that's just an example. That's not a small business. That's a big business, but a big business that without any business puts a lot of workers at risk. And so that's just an example. It's very important for us not just to help people in need now, not just to help displaced people, which is a challenge because they're all over the place. So we have people we help normally from Sderot, from Ashkelon, from places like that. Not only their need, we can't get to them like we normally do. So now we have to find them where they are. And those kind of people, some of them, funnily enough, are in a better situation than they are normally because they're staying in places where the government's covering the costs. So they may not actually need the Leket right now, but we understand when they go back, they're going to need us again. And then there are, of course, people who fall between the cracks in the government and they need help. And then there are people who've decided or really just can't. And this has been a big issue with homebound elderly in places like Ashkelon and Sderot and Netivot and Ofakim especially, who just are not comfortable leaving and they need to get food delivered directly to them. So while Leket never, ever does direct delivery to people, we always work through our agencies. We're doing a lot more of that kind of work right now. We hope temporarily. Everything I say, I hope is temporary. As you can imagine, purchasing, let's just say 10,000 meals a day costs us about 5 times more than it normally does just to rescue a meal free of charge. So we're spending something like $60,000 to $70,000 a day just purchasing cooked meals. So you just start doing the math, that's in the millions very, very quickly. Okay, let me just talk briefly about fruits and vegetables, and then I'll try to go to some of the questions. So many of you have seen, because there's been a lot of articles in the press and a lot of calls for volunteers. So farmers are really in a nightmarish situation. Deaths of many foreign workers, kidnapping of foreign workers, many foreign workers leaving, Palestinians who do a lot of the other work in farms not being allowed into the country. And so it's probably the biggest farming crisis in the history of the country. Again, hopefully a temporary short-term crisis, but if thousands of our farmers go out of business because of that, then our food security is compromised. And as we understand in Israel, we are not a nation like any other. We always live with the possibility of the world ganging up on us and needing to have our own food supply. So it's possible there are food items we might not have, but as long as we have enough to feed our population, then we will survive. And so Leket, like many others, has sprung into action over the last 6 weeks, but understand that Leket normally works with thousands of farmers in a year in, year out basis. We work with farmers. They are our most important partners. This is not something new to us. And so the minute this crisis became evident, we jumped into action. We jumped into action in a number of ways, but I want to explain something I think that is key to understanding what we're doing now that's different than normal. Normally, when you come and volunteer with Leket, okay, to pick fruits and vegetables, or when Leket sends its own team of paid pickers out into the fields, whatever Leket picks, Leket takes. We take it and we feed the poor throughout the country with that. Right now, there's a little bit of that still going on, but most of what Leket's doing, the 10,000 plus volunteers we've recruited over the last few weeks, the additional paid pickers we've hired to go to farmers, everything that we can do right now is to the benefit of the farmer, okay? Leket picks it, the farmer keeps it. I'll add another layer. Leket picks it, Leket doesn't pick it. The farmer calls us and says, I'm trying to sell, I'm having a hard time. Why are you having a hard time selling? Well, some of the supermarket chains have imported a lot because let's be dan lekavskut, they were worried about supply, and so they brought in big amounts of crops, and now we're having trouble selling them. Leket's a buyer. Leket's never a buyer. Okay, the whole point of Leket is to rescue excess fruits and vegetables. But we understood implicitly that when our number one most important partner, okay, the farmers of the state of Israel and the risks that brings us are at risk of going out of business. So we have to do everything that we can. So we're picking by them. We're picking with volunteers. We're sending paid pickers in. We're buying crops when necessary. Okay. There's very little rescue. So we also need those crops. It's for our benefit as well, or for the people that we serve, for their benefit. In addition, we are providing financial support to farmers. Okay. We've called every farmer we've ever worked with, and if they tell us they need financial support, we will provide it. Two other quick, cool stories. We launched a project with Bank Leumi, where where they are providing scholarships initially to 800, but we hope it will grow. 800 students who aren't starting school till the end of December. And those students commit to working 200 hours a week in the farms. And once that is complete, Bank Leumi is paying for their tuition for this year. Okay, that's starting now. You may have seen commercials of that. In addition, Strauss Elite is providing to every farmer Leket works with a coupon for 1,000 shekels to go in and get free Strauss products at supermarkets. And Strauss is giving us, I don't know if I'm allowed to say the number, but over 5 million shekels to make direct grants to farmers. And so there's tremendous outpouring. Okay. Just to sum that all up, okay, and then I'll look at some questions. Everything I've said so far, you just should hear numbers. Leket's normal budget pre-October 6th was about $25 million. Okay, that was our budget for the year. With that, we hope to provide about 2.5 million cooked meals, about 75 million pounds of fruits and vegetables, and there are a lot of other things that we do that we don't have time for now. Just what I spoke about now, everything we're trying to do for the war effort, and that I probably left out lots of things also, just that alone, our goal is to raise $25 million. Okay, and we're about 2/3 of the way there. And we're spending money like water, okay? Not because we want to, but we're not a hedge fund. We're not gathering funds now. This money is being donated to be used now. So where there's a need for purchased meals, we're doing it. When we hear of in Eilat, the municipality called us. They said they needed baby products. We bought 500,000 shekels worth of baby products. That's what the money is being donated for, to fill in needs. It may not be classic Leket, and we look forward as soon as possible to getting back to classic Leket, where all we're doing is just feeding the poor of Israel, which of course is a very painful thing, but that's normal in Western countries. And while I hope that it ends, that just seems to be what we need to go through, and we will do the very best. So thank you for the time. I'm sure I could say a lot more, but I'm conscious of 9:26. Let me just look here. There were some questions.
Yeah, one of the questions is, with all the influence and the amazing influence you've had, well, I've just added those words, but we all agree with that, is there any way of Leket Israel influencing government in terms of bringing down the cost of food or the VAT on the food?
Right. Okay.
What contact you have with government?
Right. So we work very closely with the government, but I can tell you, for example, VAT. By the way, let's make it worse. So there's no VAT on fruits and vegetables, okay? But there is VAT on other food. Let's make it more painful, everyone here. Charities in Israel pay VAT, okay? So when Magen David Adom goes and buys a new ambulance, they pay VAT. That's the way the government of Israel taxes charities. You may not like it, you may not like it, but I think we can all agree the government of the state of Israel right now needs a lot of tax revenue, okay? Unfortunately. You know, as much as America is going to give us, we all have to understand we are in or about to enter, a very painful recession in this country. I'm not sure how we could possibly escape that. So it's going to be very hard to convince governments to give up tax revenue. That being said, what should happen is we should be breaking up monopolies, and we should be making it cheaper and easier to import products. Israel's got to get away with a lot of its licensing. If it's good enough for the UK, and if it's good enough for the US and for France, it should be good enough for us here. Kosher is something else, right? But we need to start taking down those barriers, and that should bring down the cost of food. When it comes to imports of fruits and vegetables, I just want to point out to people, because that is so tricky, because on the one hand, we need to keep our farmers in business. And but you should know we only bring in about 5 to 7% of our produce is imported. So that keeps farmers growing things that maybe they shouldn't be growing in Israel. And it also keeps prices high. I'm not talking about taste, but we understand that to grow tomatoes in Jordan and Turkey, which are poor countries that pay people far less money, we can import them much cheaper into Israel, and they can be sold much cheaper, which certainly would help the poor or people struggling to make ends meet. The risk is, what does that do to our farmers? So these are balancing acts that, frankly, I say to you, I'm happy I'm not the Minister of Agriculture. Some people might think that would be a good job for me, but I'm happy because these are impossible questions to answer, especially if we were a normal country, okay? If we weren't the state of Israel, we could probably answer those questions. A place like the United States, which basically has unfettered imports of fruits and vegetables, okay? Because they're not worried. The US isn't worried about it. They're not worried about a siege. They're not worried about someone closing the straits. And so we have to worry about things in ways that I don't wish on any other country. And so that's a bit about VAT. I think there was one other question. By the way, anyone can volunteer. Please just send information. There's on our website a form that you can fill out for volunteering.
Right, that's what I was going to ask you. Firstly, Joseph, I just wanted to say you were entirely inspiring. Thank you so much. And I think you're a classic example of how one person can really make a difference. Often it's a cliche, but it's genuinely true. That one person, you showed us that one person could genuinely make a difference and take something to a totally new level. And in business, we talk about win-win. Well, with you, I see it as your organization as a win-win-win. It's 3 times, because it's also the farmers that you're assisting. It's also, poorer families that need the food. And you're also assisting us by giving us the opportunity to volunteer, whether it's physically volunteer or whether it's to donate. So I know there is a link in the chat. So anyone who would like to support, and you've heard the amazing things that Joseph and Leket is doing, is to support. There is a link there. I'm sure on your website too, anyone that wants to physically volunteer, do you want to just add a word about that? Either one thing about the donate or about the physically volunteering?
Sure. Excuse me, certainly we're very happy to get donations, and if people like what they heard, please let other people know what we're up to. I think we're not talking enough about the economic impact on this country. So anything we can do to support businesses here is very, very important. When it comes to volunteering, I mean, certainly I will say we are overwhelmed with people who want to volunteer, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't get your name in there. But please understand, wherever you are in this country, there is endless help needed. So I saw someone said, I live in Nahariya, how can I volunteer? I promise you, if you call the volunteer department in Nahariya, if you do a couple of Google searches, you will see that there is so much need, because there are people in Nahariya who need help. Leket works with agencies in Nahariya all the time who need help. So you can certainly reach out to us on that as well. We can try to help guide you. So don't be shy. It could be through Leket, but there's so much need right now, more than ever, possibly, unfortunately, in many, many years of this country's existence.
Right, absolutely. So, Joseph, thank you so much again. Number one, for all the amazing work that you and your organization is doing. Number two, for being a guest on our spotlight, which, as we say in Hebrew, is Lo Muvan Me'elav. I know you're very, very busy right now, so we really appreciate it. I remind you also, ladies and gents, that this recording, if you want to listen to it again, or if you'd like to share it with your friends, will be available from later today on YouTube, on my channel, or just go ahead and type Monday Motivation Spotlight, as well as on Spotify. Thank you again to our host, ACI, as well as our sponsor, Israel Properties. I'm Lesley Kaplan. I look forward to seeing you next week. Next week, we have Justine Friedman, who's here today. She's going to be our spotlight, and she's got lots of interesting and inspiring things to share with us. Thank you once again, Joseph. We truly appreciate it. Thank you to all of you for joining. Have a wonderful, inspiring day and week. And Am Yisrael Chai, and Rak Besorot Tovot, as I say, to Am Yisrael. Thank you for joining. Have a good day. Have a great day, and see you next week.
Bye-bye. Thank you again.